We've been spending a lot of time talking about what went on in Virginia, what went on in New Jersey, and elsewhere in the country on Tuesday. And the results of those elections have reminded me of something that I read about 10 days ago in the Washington Post, written by Paul Kane, under the headline, "Democrats' Problem is Not Focusing on Issues Most Vital to Independence." So say two prominent pollsters. One of those pollsters, Joel Benenson, who, by the way, recently wrote for Smerconish.com. He was Barack Obama's pollster in 2008 and in 2012. The other pollster, with whom he's now joined forces for a centrist-related cause, is Neil Newhouse, the co-founder of Public Opinion Strategies, who was John McCain's principal pollster in 2008 and then played the same role for Mitt Romney in 2012. Public Opinion Strategies has been regarded by the New York Times as the leading Republican polling company. It's awfully nice to have Neil Newhouse back on the program. Neil, thank you for being here. By the way, I'm recording this conversation for Zoom in addition to providing it live across country right now for SiriusXM. So I see you sitting in your office, and I'm always curious with a guy like you, what's hanging behind you? What's that headline on the wall? And of all the memorabilia that you could be displaying, what is it and why?
All right, two things on the wall. One is Shelley Moore Capito from the Charleston Daily Mail. She became West Virginia's first female senator, historic gains for GOP, and I have worked with Shelley like a good 20 years. And the other one, you'll love this one. This is sticking with Joe. This is Joe Lieberman. I was recruited to help out Joe Lieberman after he lost the primary to Ned Lamont in Connecticut for U.S. Senate. He was an incumbent senator, and his entire Democratic team left him. I was recruited to do that campaign, and we ended up winning 50-40 over Ned Lamont. So those are two very meaningful campaigns that I was involved in, and I love those candidates.
Neil, eBay. A fortune. I'm telling you, a fortune, especially if you have Lieberman's signature on the ladder. Hey, I reread the story from Paul Kane. I am putting you and Benenson down as least surprised about the outcome on Tuesday, but I don't want to speak for you. Talk to me.
Yeah, I don't know why the Democrats are now, kind of putting out the red flags that danger signs. They should have seen this coming. Everybody else did. And it's not just Joe Biden's numbers and the mood of it's the mood of the country. It is, you saw it in Virginia. I think the only thing people were maybe surprised at is how close New Jersey ended up. But wow, it's a typical midterm election, and we're running into it. I mean, I did the Scott Brown race in, 2009, 2010. It feels the same now as it did then in terms of the rejection of the party in power. So I don't think there were that many surprises on Tuesday night. And I think if anything, they should have seen it coming.
So you and Joel Benenson now working together for Center Forward, which is described as a centrist think tank. What is the analysis that you did pertaining to independence that caused you to say, hey, I'm not that surprised about Virginia?
Well, it wasn't just independence, Michael. It was what we saw in the data. And this was, we didn't go into it with the idea that we we're going to find this, but there's a sense that what Washington is focused on, what Congress is trying to pass, the issues that are impacting Congress every day are not the ones that are impacting everyday households. This is the overwhelming concern about the cost of living, about inflation, and then the linkage, the most surprising thing I saw in the survey, the linkage these voters made between overspending by the federal government and cost of living and also labor shortages. There was a sense among these voters that the government incentives, the government handouts, over the last year or so have created a disincentive for people to go to work. And so just a frustration with kind of the fact that Congress isn't dealing with the issues that really bother voters the most.
So this is a very timely issue. I had Senator Chris Coons on the program earlier today. He's convinced that finally they'll get a win on the $1.2 trillion traditional infrastructure package. I don't know what becomes of, nor does he, the Build Back Better plan. But Neil, some Democrats take a look at the result on Tuesday and they say, see that? Joe Manchin is right to be cautious. We shouldn't go forward with that big spending bill. Others, Representative Jayapal among others, say, well, we lost because we haven't delivered all those things. I think I hear you saying that the data suggests it's the former, not the latter, that there's great concern about the spending among voters.
Yeah, I mean, and there is, and people are seeing it every day. They look at the gas prices. They look at the shortages in grocery stores. They are becoming extraordinarily frustrated with the way things are going right now. And part of the problem in D.C. is not whether they should pass the infrastructure or the overall spending bill, but the fact that Democrats have control of the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and they can't pass a damn thing. It is the competency of this administration that people are beginning to wonder about. So, Michael, we did focus groups a couple of weeks ago in Nashville, and we were talking to African American voters. And it was a different topic. It's a school topic. It had nothing to do with Biden or Washington politics. But at the end of the session, we asked about how's Joe Biden doing, and it was met with shrugs to some extent. There was no enthusiasm for the president among these African American voters. There was a sense that he lacked leadership, and they were more or less committed to his reelection, but it was lukewarm at best. And I think you're seeing that in some of the data across the country, and that lack of enthusiasm impacts turnout, which impacts elections, as we saw in Virginia and New Jersey.
Other data from the past week that has come out, not your data. NBC, 71% said the country's headed in the wrong direction. ABC, 32% said the spending bill, the so-called Build Back Better bill, is going to hurt me, not help me. 44%, according to NPR Marist, of Democrats say somebody other than Biden ought to be the nominee. Does that all comport with what you've been getting?
Yeah, in fact, those NBC numbers are our numbers.
They are. Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry.
But Michael, I think that's the most significant number out there. The mood of the country: 22% right direction, 71 wrong track. It is as negative as it was immediately after the January 6th Capitol riots, and it has not been this negative since July of 2016, and before that, October of 2011. These are very negative numbers. It is an extraordinarily pessimistic political environment, and it's being driven not just by what's happening in D.C., but by the sense of the economy. A majority of voters think the economy is getting worse, and they are pessimistic that it's going to be better in the next year. So yeah, our numbers match up with what we're seeing out there, and this is a very precarious political environment for the party in power, the Democrats.
Okay, so something else, pardon me for not recognizing that these were your numbers, but something else in the NBC data that really jumped off the page to me was on the question of how we see the parties, which party will do a better job. And Neil, you can present this better than I can, but when you ask about which party does a better job on something like climate change, well, the D's have a plus 24 advantage. When it's the border, it's ours by 27. And when I looked at this, I said the R's have better issues, better defined as the sort of things that drive you to go to the polls and vote.
Yeah, the number one and two are economy and immigration, which are, arguably two of the top issues facing the country right now. There's no question those numbers on which party can better handle each of the following issues, they really provide more ammunition for the sense that the Republican candidates have the wind behind their backs. And it's not that the House leadership or Republican House leadership or Republican Senate leadership have pushed these issues. It is a frustration with the current Democratic leadership that has helped propel these numbers.
Donald J. Trump. What thoughts do you have?
Well, you know what's really interesting, and the way I look at the data, Michael, is in March and April when Joe Biden was doing so well. In April, his approval rating was 55%. We asked voters, why do you approve of him? And the number one response was, well, he's not Donald Trump. Okay, well, that's interesting. And now 6 months later or so, what we're seeing and what we're sensing in the data is Donald Trump's further in the rearview mirror. Voters don't have him on their minds like they did in the spring. And so Joe Biden is standing kind of on his own 2 feet. They're assessing Joe Biden based on his competency, on the job he's done. Even in Virginia, when Donald Trump didn't play he played maybe a minor role, but they tried to make the campaign about, Democrats tried to make the campaign about Donald Trump, and they were unsuccessful. Even in the California recall election, the governor tried to make the campaign about Donald Trump and was unsuccessful, and he turned it into a referendum against his potential Republican opponent, and he ended up winning the race. The more that Donald Trump right now is in the rearview mirror, the more it helps Republicans right now and in going into the 22 elections.
The post-mortem on Virginia largely says, well, Youngkin has just given Republicans the playbook as to how you keep proper distance from Donald Trump. Yes, you don't want to antagonize him. You need his base, but you don't want to get too close either. So Republican candidates who reach out now for Neil Newhouse, and I'm sure there'll be many headed into the midterm election, what will you counsel them on that issue?
Well, that's a fine line. I mean, it really is. And I think they did a nice job in this campaign. I think the people around Donald Trump convinced him that it was a smart decision to do to stay in the background. I'm not sure that'll last through the 22 elections. That's a hell of a question. But the lessons from this campaign are try to use him to energize your base, but but you've got to also keep some distance so you're not tied lock, stock, and barrel to him. The more that I think it was a blessing for Republicans that his Twitter was taken away from him because he's just not in the news every day. And the further he is from the minds of most Americans right now, the better probably it is for Republicans going into 22. But that doesn't mean a damn thing about what's going to happen in 24. He could still, if he decides to run, he will be the nominee, and he stands a hell of a good chance of beating Joe Biden.
So make us all look smart. We're listening to Neil Newhouse, the preeminent Republican pollster in the country, analyzing what just transpired across the country, but most notably in Virginia and in New Jersey. What's the takeaway? What can I go to dinner tonight and share with friends and look intelligent? It was not the culture wars that won the race here in Virginia for Glenn Youngkin. It was his focus on education. It was dissatisfaction with the current administration. And I think what you look for in the framing of the 2022 election is going to be Democratic overreach in Congress, trying to do too much, spending too much, which has taken money out of our pockets, and voters are going to react negatively to that. So when Carville talks about needing wokeness detox, like he's really not putting his finger on exactly what drove people to go out and vote?
Yeah, I mean, it's he's hitting on it, but that's not necessarily what drove people in this thing. That was even the national numbers, even our NBC poll indicates that Republicans are more enthusiastic about voting in the next election cycle than Democrats. It's not the wokeness. It's just it's frustration and dissatisfaction with the current administration, and the sense of lack of competence. They don't seem to be getting the job done.
Neil, I promise I'll let you go after this. You've been so gracious with your time, but here's my takeaway listening to you. Manchin is onto something. I mean, on Monday, Joe Manchin came out and said, and he was relying on Penn Wharton data, and he said, look, the real number is not 1.75 trillion. The real number is closer to 3.9 trillion, double or thereabouts what we are being told. And it sounds like intuitively the American people, your data suggests, view it the same way. Like, hey, it's not how I run my house. How's the federal government going to possibly be spending all this money?
It's not just all this money. It's all this money on top of all the other money that's already been spent. And there's a belief that has contributed to the issues we're facing now with cost of living increases, gas prices, and there's a fear to some extent of what's going to happen when the bill becomes due for this next $1 trillion spending packages. So it's are we throwing good money after bad? I mean,
and creating a disincentive. And I think I heard you speak to a disincentive being created for people not to work. The extension of those unemployment benefits at a time where literally today the data suggests there's a job for every person in the country who is currently unemployed.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we can have a jobs problem when so many people are unemployed and so many jobs are going unfilled. It doesn't seem to make sense to people.
Neil, that was excellent. Thank you so much. I hope you'll keep coming back.
Thank you, Michael. We'd be glad to. Thank you.